How we doing, folks? Welcome to day 4 of Edgar Allan Poe. Some of you will be happy to know this is actually our last day. Our next activity we will do following the reading and working through The Pit and the Pendulum, which I've kind of warned you on the question sheet today. It's probably the most challenging of the 4 that we have read. That being said, there's a really good YouTube video here, and I'm actually have it playing here over on what is the left side of my screen that should help you understand what is going on and give you some context. I think it makes the story much easier to get through. Additionally, you'll notice here in a little bit, the question sheet is set up a little bit differently today. So ultimately, what we will do when we get through all 4 Edgar Allan Poe pieces may or may not have some sort of test, but the bigger thing I'm going to ask you to do is to compare and contrast any 2 stories of your choosing. So we're going to take a look here at specifically The Pit and the Pendulum today, and I'm going to assist you in getting through. And again, this video, it will give you subtitles word for word as they appear in the reading, which is right here, The Pit and the Pendulum. Went ahead and went iBiblio today on your reading. Text is a little bit bigger. And this story is it's quite a bit longer, maybe than some of the things that we have read, comparable though to The Black Cat. So again, your question sheet at the top, it will have a link to the story, which I just showed you. It will have the YouTube video with subtitles here that I think it'll help you quite a bit. It's kind of silly in some places. Again, kind of a dark story. It's a man who is ultimately going to be tortured, tormented as part of the Spanish Inquisition. So question 1, and I'm going to scroll here. Feel free to use any of this stuff that I tell you. A couple things at the top there you can read, one of which, let me move my face here. If you hold Control and hit F, and I type in Spanish, Inquisition's not in there, fire. Any word that you type in or phrases of words, it will show you where to find that. Plan to hurl. So if you are looking for additional information as you work through the quote sheet, hold Command and then F, and it'll pop up, and you can type in anything that you would like. Judges, all right, robe judges. Any phrase, make sure you spell it correctly. So I made a note of that on your assignment, that Command F, the one just to the left of the space bar. It's my favorite function on a computer, and it really helps with activities like this, because what I'm going to do for a lot of this question sheet is basically, here's question 2, for instance, I'll include a quote, and then below that, you're going to use that quote or that part of the story to answer question 2. Same thing with 3. So while the entire sheet isn't like that, you, in most cases, will have a quote followed by a question. Okay, and you're going to use those lines and kind of think about what that means. And again, the video, I think, will be a great assist for you today, because it does kind of show you, as well as telling you, what's going on there. So that being said, let's dive into the Spanish Inquisition a little bit and the reasons behind why Edgar Allan Poe may 350 so years later have wanted to base this story of torture on the Spanish Inquisition. So question 1 asks you to tell us some things about the Spanish Inquisition. If you want to give it a Google, feel free. If you want to just steal some of these things I'm about to tell you, feel free. So first of all, Spanish Inquisition starts in 1478. And actually, it ended in a lot of parts of the country, but wasn't totally abolished until 1834. The Spanish Inquisition, it was pretty simple. We had heretics, individuals who would not accept in Spain and all Spanish colonies the Catholic faith. So in Spain and all Spanish colonies, which at times during that time period included North, Central, and South America, those were Spanish colonies for periods of time, 150,000, roughly, we're estimating, people were prosecuted, 3,000 to 500 of which, 3,000, to 5,000 of which ultimately were executed. So a lot of torture, a lot of prosecution, relatively low percentage of people were actually killed. Edgar Allan Poe is going to take this story, this historical period, 350 to 375 years later, and he's going to say, you know what, I want to write a story based around this, because it's kind of what I'm into. I'm into torture, I'm into decisions, and what he's going to do is he is going to throw a man into a dungeon, and he is going to start in the total darkness. This man will have no idea where he is. He thinks he knows what's going to happen to him. He's fairly certain that he will be killed, but he doesn't know why or how. So it's going to start in pitch dark, which if you're looking here at the video that's playing, you will see that eventually he is going to dodge death. And the lights are going to come on, and he's going to have kind of a second thing that's going to torture him. So Edgar Allan Poe bases this around the Spanish Inquisition. And like I said, that started in 1478. It was totally abolished by Isabella II in 1834. So for a long period of time, this is something that was going on. They were trying to force individuals to accept the Catholic faith. Thankfully, Catholics are more gentle now, perhaps, and this is no longer happening to us. So that being said, let's take a look here at the question sheet. And again, I cannot reiterate enough, the YouTube video is going to help you quite a bit today, but I want to do the same thing. So we kind of talked about question one. The Spanish Inquisition is this period of time in which individuals of power are trying to force others who are not Catholic, maybe religious, but not Catholic, to embrace the Catholic faith or leave or be prosecuted, persecuted, and in some cases, 3,000 to 5,000 people were in fact killed for this. Question two. So talking about this guy, he's in the dungeon. You can see it's still pretty dark. He now is kind of moving around, wants to know what's there. Kind of wants to know what's there. So question two, here's the quote you're going to be taking a look at here. So far I had not opened my eyes. I felt that I lay upon my back unbound. I reached out my hand and it fell heavily upon something damp and hard. There I suffered it to remain for many minutes while I strove to imagine where and what I could be. I longed, and this is the part really to think about here, these last two sentences. I longed or wanted to, yet dared not or was afraid to employ my vision or open my eyes. I dreaded the first glance at objects around me. He kind of has a dilemma there. He wants to do something, but he's hesitant to do it. Why is that? Take a look at that last sentence, specifically there in question two. All right. Question three. Question three really becomes, I don't know, this is probably not something we've talked about in class, or maybe we won't, but question three really is our narrator. And again, we have another first-person point of view story here. Our narrator thinks that there is one way that would be the worst way to die. And he talks about it within this paragraph. So he says he doesn't want to use his arms for a period of time and reach them upward because he is afraid of something. It's a capital, all capitalized word in there. What does he think would be the worst thing that they could have done to him? And how does he feel when he realizes that is not the case? I'm going to let you figure out the rest of that there. Question four. I think this one's pretty straightforward here. We already kind of touched on this earlier. But our narrator accepts something. But that last sentence there, the mode and the hour were all that occupied or distracted me. Think about what that means, specifically mode and hour. And if you're not sure what those words perhaps mean, think about those a little bit. Give mode a Google. There are a couple things he doesn't know. He accepts one thing. He is curious about, kind of in a really twisted way, the other two. Question five is one you're just going to have to find in either the reading and or the video. And it details it and narrates it in the video as well. But toward the beginning of the story, he is curious about the cell in which he is trapped, thrown into, whatever. He talks about people carrying him down. So we know he's in the ground somewhere. But he can't see. So what does he do to try to figure out the size of this dungeon in which he is being held captive? Okay, you may need to go to the reading for that a little bit. But there's something that he does to try to figure out the dimensions as far as how far around the area there. So, question six, to the victims of its. By its, he is referring to the Spanish Inquisition. So, to the victims of the Spanish Inquisition's tyranny, there was a choice of death with its direst physical agonies or death with its most hideous moral horrors. He finds out that there is something in the middle of his cell. And kind of think about this. We're going to see this maybe even right now-ish. Yep, looks like in the video. At any point he realizes, at least in the first half of the story, he can do something if he gets tired of being tortured, if he gets tired of this mind game. if he gets tired of this struggle and this battle. At any point, he realizes that there's something that he can do there in question 6. Question 7. His state is going to be changed a little bit here momentarily. He will be strapped to a board, to a table, whatever, and will no longer be free to move around. And there's a reason for that. Think about the second part of the title of this story will be the second obstacle that he has to overcome. And this one's going to be a little bit trickier than the first one. So his captors do something. Every time he wakes up, they give him a couple things. And think about why they maybe do this. And question 7 kind of leads you to that conclusion. Once we find out what the second torture device is, I guess, if you want to think about that, the second thing in the title, the pit and the insert here, if you need to Google that, feel free, but the video also does a nice job. What message do you think they're trying to send him with a depiction or image of time there in question 8? Question 9. Question 9 is a little bit interesting. When I go to Taco Bell and I order mild sauce, I know that that is not as intense as the fire sauce or the hot sauce. So once he realizes that he dodged the first way he could have been killed, and now he realizes the second way he could be killed as he looks above him and there's this swinging blade, he says, milder. What is milder about being chopped in half? And he kind of is amused by his word choice there. Personally, I've never been chopped in half, but I can imagine that would not be super fun to watch myself be chopped in half. Question 10. He wakes up in this blade that is coming downward very, very slowly. He wakes up and he realizes that during the time he has been sleeping, it has not come down. Why? Last sentence should help you there. Why has it not come down closer to him as he has been sleeping? Question 11. He comes up with an idea here momentarily, and in the video you can see what he cannot. But take a look at how he is strapped to this table, and for a slight moment of time he thinks that maybe he is wrapped right here as well. And as that pendulum comes down, he thinks that he will have an opportunity to do something as it starts to cut across his chest. But he looks up and he realizes something about the way that he is strapped to this table. But temporarily, he does have hope he can do what? Moving on here, because we're going to run out of time. The rats that you've seen in the dungeon, and you'll see this play out here. He's been given food, he's been given water, and he decides, I'm going to use this food to help me escape this situation in which I am in now. I don't really want to be chopped in half necessarily. I certainly don't want to watch it happen. How does he use these rats here? And there's a quote above there as well. But how does he use the rats as well in the video? Specifically kind of their aggressiveness, their hangriness, if you will. How does he use them to get out of his second precarious position? And then he says, I'm free here momentarily. Once he gets out of this jam, he says, I'm free, and then he realizes, is he free? No, he's still in a dungeon. He still thinks he's going to be killed. Just doesn't know how, doesn't know why, doesn't know when. Knows why. It's because he wouldn't accept the faith. But something happens toward the end of this story as well. We talk about kind of science fiction elements. Certainly they wouldn't have had this technology in the, say it's 1490 or something, whenever he would have been thrown into this situation. Again, Edgar Allan Poe writing 300 to 400 years later about the Spanish Inquisition because he thinks it's fascinating. But toward the end of the story, something happens to the dimensions of the cell, and it pushes him into the middle of the cell toward the original terror he faced. And he kind of got lucky he didn't immediately fall into that. But he has a reality. He realizes what's happening to that cell. So kind of talk about that. Talk about what's happening to his dungeon in question 13. And then lastly, this is kind of on you. Think about how this story is similar and different to the other Edgar Allan Poe stories that we have read. So certainly I think there's one major difference in the end, the way that it concludes for our narrator here. His ending's a little bit different than the others. But in what ways is it similar? In what ways is it different? Just give me a brief paragraph there. 3 to 5 sentences is fine. If you have questions, reach out, folks. Look, I think this is the best way that I can have you work through this. This is your only assignment today. So do the best you can. Read The Pit and the Pendulum. Vocab list 3 as well is posted in the module today. So we will assess that next week. See ya.